Thanks for joining our first webinar for 2026, focusing on your favorite Orchid module, EFT processing for Sage 300. We know many of you are familiar with EFT processing, but hope to share some less commonly used features and configuration options. We will highlight implementation tips and answer common support questions. In the first part, Anne and I will discuss the user journey when implementing EFT. This applies to new sites, new companies, for existing customers, as well as when a customer starts working with a new bank. And we'll then try and demystify EFT formats to facilitate selecting a format, implementing a new format, and showing you how the formats are configurable to match the AP and AR processes. We'll go through some common support questions, including SFTP and emails. And in the second part, we will show you how you can use Extender with EFT for more advanced functionality, approving EFT vendor and customer records, approving batches before you can create an EFT file, and encrypting EFT files. First, a review of the main features and benefits of EFT processing. Who needs it? EFT lets you streamline Sage 300 payments to pay vendor invoices, streamline customer refunds, and receipts. You can use it for direct debit, for recurring rent, subscriptions, etc. If you're using Sage 300 US or Canadian payroll, you can also pay employees by EFT. EFT ensures increased accuracy, security, and auditability, supports remote working and the paperless office, as you can email remittance advice, pay slips, statements. Numerous security features, including encryption of bank account details, enhance the security of your data, and faster processing. And we support hundreds of bank file formats. For example, ISO 20022 in a range of countries, SIPA in Europe, ACH and NACHA in the US, CPA, CAN CPA 005, and other CPA versions in Canada, BACS in the UK, wire transfers in many countries, BPay and ABA in Australia. And as many of you know, we create new formats on request for customers who are current on software assurance or subscription. EFT processing has a very quick ROI. You're saving on your bank transaction fees, don't have to print, paper check, stationery, reduce printing. And the automatic EFT file creation avoids duplicate data entry between Sage 300 and the banking system. For those of you who missed last month's webinar, here's a summary of new features in 2025. And you can see more details in the EFT release notes and on the Orchid website product news. Sundry fixes to the EFT web screens, support for the latest versions of payroll. We changed the tool in the background that lets you encrypt remittance advice PDF using now QPDF. Improvements to message templates in French language and many new EFT formats, as well as an updated Extender app for PGP encryption of EFT files. Now, before we delve into the details, let's share with you the standard user journey when implementing EFT processing and highlight some best practices in how you, both business partners and end users, work with Orchid and with the bank to ensure the smoothest possible implementation. The scenario is a customer who has just purchased EFT processing and starts the implementation. It would be very similar for a user implementing EFT in a new company or working with a different bank. Here, we are focusing on the implementation steps where Orchid is involved with a partner and the end user. As the process is similar for vendors, customers, and employees, we'll generally refer to vendors in the examples to keep things simple. Often, the journey starts with a purchase order. The PO should include the Sage version, the addition, and a screenshot of the system manager name to avoid any delays. As soon as the order is paid, we send you an activation code for the requested versions and all currently supported versions. For example, if you purchase version 2025, we will send you serial numbers and activation codes for versions 2025 and 2026. You can then download EFT processing from the Orchid website. To do this, the consultant needs to be registered on the Orchid website as a partner, and we encourage all new consultants to register to access the product downloads and other relevant resources like the knowledge base. We have documented the steps to install and don't want to repeat this today. Today, the focus is around selecting, implementing, and testing the EFT format. This applies to new sites, new companies, and customers who start working with a new bank or a new account type. For example, they start using EFT to process wire payments or AR direct debit to debit customers' bank accounts. The first question we would ask is, what bank? What are the bank specs? Do you have the sample file? The customer may have the information or may need to request details from their bank. And Anne will expand on some other questions to help this process a bit later. Orchid would then assess if the format already exists and will tell you what format to use in the EFT options primary file type, or if we need to create a new format. If the client has a current subscription or current software assurance plan and the request is for a supported version of Sage 300, we create new formats at no extra cost. For a user running older versions, we will assess if it's possible, and if so, provide a quote for the format. This is because some formats rely on features in the formatting engine that don't exist in older versions, and we don't maintain test machines for unsupported versions of Sage 300. We generally send a new format a few days after we receive the request. For more complex formats, we also send setup instructions in addition to the tooltips built into the format itself. Depending on the scenario, we will send you an updated formats.ini if the changes apply broadly to anyone using that format, or we will send you a user formats.ini if the changes are specific to the way you're using the format. You then need to copy this file onto your Sage 300 EFT folder or the customization directory. You can then configure the format, set up the bank in EFT, enter a few vendor, customer, or employee details, process an AP payment or AR receipt or a payroll run so that you can create a test file. This is when the bank is involved to confirm that the file is successful. Once you've uploaded it, if the bank confirms it's successful, you can continue the configuration and get ready for go live. If there are issues with the file, please send us the bank's feedback, including the file you exported and some screenshots of the setup. Depending on the feedback, we will update the format if required and send it to you, or advise on what option to enable in EFT, and or how the data needs to be updated if a field was missed. And we repeat this process until the file is successfully uploaded to the bank. This generally happens on a test server or at least on a test database. Can be pretty immediate, particularly if the bank is very responsive and you've planned the implementation of the new format, the new system with the bank. Sometimes it takes a few days to get the bank's feedback. You are then ready to prepare for the go live implementation. Import all vendor, customer, employee details and train the end users. In addition to the formats, Orchid also helps to troubleshoot emailing configuration so that you can email remittance advices, and to configure SFTP for customers who upload directly to the bank's site. And we'll get back to that in the common support questions. And now I'm going to hand over to Anne to go through some details about EFT formats.
Thanks, Natalie. So as Natalie mentioned, the EFT bank specification or EFT bank file specification for the format that you need is an essential document for us to verify that the existing format is going to work for you, or to create a new one to work for you. And a sample file at the same time as sending us the bank spec is really, really useful if you can get it. So the specification defines for us which fields are going to be used on the EFT vendor, the EFT bank, the EFT customer, and the EFT employee, and how we need to format that data into the EFT file along with the payment details and the applied invoice details. Specifically, the EFT file format allows us to turn on or off the extra fields on the EFT bank, vendor, customer, and employee, which may be required for that particular format. It provides length validations on bank account and bank branch fields. It allows for a field name to be customized for the format, specific tooltips for a field, and hyperlinks for additional tips to be customized per format. And it provides for the formulas to format the data, the EFT-related data, into the required format for the bank. And the default format defined in EFT options on the primary file type tab, and will turn on and off and provide the validations for the vendors, customers, and employees, unless you're using multiple formats. And then chat to us and we can show you a different way to have multiple formats and to have these validations specific to each format for each vendor. Having a look at the CAN CPA 005, you can see that the vendor, customer, and employee's branch number is limited or validated to see that it's either 8 or 9 digits long. The account size must be between 3 characters and 12 characters long. The branch code is called Financial Institution ID or Transit Number. There's a tip on the Financial Institution ID saying 9 digits followed in this structure and so on. The account number field is called account number. The account name field is called account name. And on the bank, we have a different originator ID number for AP payments, for AR direct debits, and for the payroll payments as well. And then we've got 4 extra fields turned on the bank. 1, the destination data center code, and with a tip saying please contact your bank for the destination data center code. There is a bank extra 2, which is turned on for the short name, 15 characters long. Bank extra 3 is turned on but called qualifying header, and there you must fill in a yes or no, and whether or not it's a test file is stored in bank extra 4, yes/no. And just as you can work with extra fields in the bank, you can do the same on the EFT details on the customer, for example, statement reference and proof of payment, and on the vendor, for example, vendor payment reference and vendor proof of payment and statement reference. And you can do the same for EFT employees too, up to 50 extra fields for each of those master file records. And now we're going to have a look at changing the primary file type and the effect on EFT vendors. Currently in the system, in EFT options, the primary file type is set to the CAN CPA 005. And based on the EFT format for CAN CPA 005, the fields on the EFT vendor, customer, and employee are the financial institution ID, transit number, account name, and payment reference. But if we were to select an alternative format, for example, the RBC ISO 20022, we see that the EFT vendor needs a lot more information, including the ISO country code, the IBAN number, the SWIFT number, plus additional fields on the additional tabs. Who's going to bear the cost of the transfer? The bank's address, including the country code, instructions for the creditor agent code, and the account type. But over and above the data that's included in the file which the EFT bank spec covers, there are some processing considerations around EFT and your payments that will affect what we use in the file. So for example, are you using future dated payments? So in the EFT file, we can include the payment date as of the individual payments, the payment batch date, the system date, or configure a manually entered date. So if you are doing all your payments on the Monday and you want the bank to do the debit or credit on the Friday, and you are able to send them future dated payments, we should configure a manually entered date for you so that you can enter Friday's date and then the debit or credit will happen on that date. Or you can date your batch accordingly or date your payments accordingly. But another consideration is the payment date in the header of the file, or is there a date on each and every detailed payment? Because you may not be able to have individual payment dates for all the different payments if the payment date is in the header of the file, in which case you need to group your payments by payment date into a single batch. Another consideration is if you're using multi-currency. And is the currency code on the header of the file or on each payment detail record? Because according to that, you may or may not be able to send a batch to the bank with mixed currencies in. And does the bank require a specific file naming convention? You are able to configure on the EFT bank whether you use some fixed text, the calendar year, month and day, or a sequence number in the file name. And so you are able to match what the bank is after, but we need to know that ahead of time so you can configure it accordingly. And some banks require a file sequence number, which is a running number that must go up by one with each bank that is submitted. So if you do need a file sequence number, you need to start off your EFT processing using the last file sequence number generated on the previous system. And also some banks allow you to have a running file sequence number across multiple bank accounts with the same bank. And then you can configure a global file sequence number to run across multiple banks.
Thank you, Anne. As you can see, there are many variations, in particular for some of the newer, more sophisticated formats that banks want to offer their clients. So we are currently compiling a list of the common questions that will be available on the Orchid website shortly. Let's now review a few common support questions around EFT clearing banks, uploading to SFTP, emailing with Office 365, and troubleshooting the EFT web screens. For each of these topics, we will highlight some important things to consider so you know it's available when you need it. We will not go through a detailed demonstration of these points as the steps are in the various training videos and online help when you need them. Let's start with EFT Clearing Bank. Why use it? As you probably know, when posting a batch of payments in accounts payable, the individual payments go onto the bank reconciliation in bank services. Many banks show EFT payments in total on the bank statement. So it's often easier to reconcile if the total of the payment batch is reflected on the bank services statement. So if you want to see the AP payment batch to post to bank services in total, then you can set up your EFT bank as a clearing bank type and link it to your actual bank account. You can also use clearing banks to enable different bank settings, such as folder, file name, or file type for the same bank, as there is no direct option to have different settings like this in EFT. For example, if you have a bank doing standard EFT with ABA in Australia and using the same one for BPay, then you can use clearing bank, one for your main bank and one for BPay. Or if you're doing domestic payments and international payments from the same bank account. Direct EFT direct with a different naming convention from Positive Pay files. So when using clearing bank, you set up your bank in EFT in bank services, but your bank in EFT as well, like a standard bank, except you choose bank type as clearing bank for a particular another EFT bank, in this case CCB, and you can choose how the transfer number is created. Then you set up the bank details that you need, your output destination, file naming, file path, file type, and whatever fields are required from the EFT file format. How does it work for the users? Well, when you enter your AP payment batch, you select the EFT clearing bank as the bank for the batch. Then you post the batch, and when you create the EFT file for this clearing bank, for this batch, EFT will create the file and automatically create a bank transfer, drawing from the actual bank account and doing a deposit to the EFT clearing bank. Then, when you do your bank reconciliations, you perform it as normal using the regular bank in bank services. You only use the EFT clearing bank in bank services to do, if you're doing a reversal in the main bank, then you need to do the reverse transfer manually between the clearing bank and the main bank. And all this is documented in the EFT processing help in the tutorial to set up clearing bank. We've touched on the EFT processing process in the previous example, in the previous topic, where you enter and post your payments. You then create the EFT file, at which point you have two options. Option one is to save the file on a network folder or download it, especially if you're using the EFT Web Screens, or use SFTP for direct upload to the bank. So let's focus on SFTP for now. Why would you use SFTP? When using file output destination, you need to use network security to protect the file, but the user who creates the file needs to have right to that folder. So if you want to do some separation of duty, you need to have a user who creates the EFT file who has rights to write into that folder, and a different user can read from that folder and upload to the bank. If you're using SFTP, you can configure the EFT bank to send the EFT file directly to that FTP site. And it can be your own SFTP site, especially if you want to control the file security more, or directly to the bank's SFTP site, and that is more and more common across various countries. We have demonstrated the detailed steps for this before, and again, it is all documented in the help for details. Now let's focus on the main points of configuring SFTP. When you configure the output destination to SFTP, there are three options to connect: a username and a password, or a key file and a username, or with two-factor authentication, a key file with a password to protect the key files. The other options, your file naming options, the file extension, the file type, and the other fields you need on the bank are the same whether you use SFTP or export to a file or download on your machine. Main support questions is generally around the key file, so let's have a look at the key file tips. SSH keys are made up of two keys, public key and a private key. The file name for the public key is generally star.pub, which gets uploaded. You upload the public key to the FTP server, so the bank's FTP site or your FTP site, and you upload the private key to the FTP client, in this case the Sage 300 server. The private key file needs to be in a shared directory on the server that all EFT users who create EFT file have access to. If it's on a network share, you need to use UNC in the file path, and shared data folder is a good option, particularly if you're using the web screens. You need to use an open SSH key using the RSA format. You can generate the key pairs using PuTTY or Cleopatra and test the file with that, or the bank may give you a key, a private key to use. When you open the key file in Notepad, it needs to start with begin RSA private key and end with end RSA private key. So this is the number one support question with SFTP. There is a test button to test the connection on the EFT bank. So you can use it and it will send a test text file to the bank to check the connection. The next step is, once it's successful in the test, is to create an EFT file and make sure that it gets uploaded to the bank successfully. Emailing with Office 365. This is also a very common support question, and there are two options. One is using SMTP, which has been around for a long time. It works even if you have multi-factor authentication turned on. You just need to create an app password for the user. But that assumes that your Office 365 implementation is allowing SMTP, the high level, and then for the users that you're going to use in the configuration, you need to create an app password. The email server settings should be smtp.office365.com:587. It's a standard SMTP port. The password is the app password that you create for that user, not your standard password, just the app password. Generally, the email user and the email comes from need to be the same with Office 365. Encryption should be set to TLS. And if you are sending lots of emails, very likely you should be setting the limit per email as 30 per minute. Check your special configuration in Office 365, but the standard is 30 per minute. If you set up CC or BCC, it generally doesn't work when you send a test email, so you have to test that with an actual remittance advice. If Office 365 has completely disabled SMTP, then you need to use Microsoft Graph like you do in Sage 300 Company Profile. Your tenant ID and your client ID are in your Office 365 subscription. Sometimes they're also known as Directory ID or Application ID. You can find them in your Microsoft Entra, or it's generally provided by IT. Then for each application that needs to email with SFTP, so for example, EFT options here, you need a client secret, and that is made up of two things, the secret ID and the secret value. What we need here is the secret value, the one you only see pop up as you create it, and you can't see it again. This is generally only valid for about 2 years, so if it has been working for a while and suddenly stops working, the first thing to check is log into Office 365 and see if you need to create a new client secret to update the details here. The user comes from the CC, BCC, and the limit of sending emails per minute or per session is same as for SMTP. Often you'd suggest 30 email per minute for Office 365. Orchid released web screens for EFT processing, transaction screens, and options, vendor setup, customer setup, and EFT options and EFT bank a while back. This is a summary of what you need to install the web screens. You need to have the Sage 200 web screens working fine. You need a current subscription license for EFT for the version that you're running. If you currently have a perpetual license and it is current on software assurance, we can convert it to a subscription license at the same price. Contact us for this. If it's not current on software assurance, then contact us as well for a catch-up. You need to install the latest EFT processing update, as it includes new features and fixes. And you need to install Extender latest product update. You do not need an activation code if you are only using Extender for the web screens. But if you are using Extender for other things and you have Extender, then it's fine. You just need to install the product update. You then need to activate Extender in all companies where you want to use the web screens. Restart IIS and you should see the EFT processing menu on the web screens. And now I'm going to hand over to Anne to go through approving EFT vendors and customers and AP payments to create EFT file using Extender.
Thanks, Natalie. EFT has a number of security features to allow you to control who can enter and view the EFT details and who can create EFT files. And this is typically done through the Sage security considerations by limiting access of users by assigning them to appropriately configured security groups. And this is all described in the EFT help. And you can read up on the various security groups that are applicable. EFT details for vendors, customers, and employees is automatically logged. So who edits, inserts, updates, which fields, and when. But one of the more useful security features is the ability to have a separation of duties on who enters EFT details for vendors, customers, employees, and a second group of people who can only approve these EFT details. So using EFT, you can have a two-level or separation of duties between two groups of peoples on the maintenance of EFT details for vendors, customers, and employees. So firstly, in the EFT options, you set the default status for EFT vendors, EFT customers, and EFT employee details. Set it to be entered. So whenever anyone creates or changes a vendor's bank account details, for example, the status will automatically go to entered. And that group of users cannot change the status to be active. And then using EFT security groups, you would allow some users to edit the details and some users to approve the details. So you create two security roles for vendors, customers, employees, EFT details, one to view and edit, and one to approve. And then when EFT details are amended or updated, only the approver group can set it to active. And the vendors or customer or employees' EFT details need to be active in order for it to be included in an EFT file. And this is a process I'm going to demonstrate now using two users, Anne, who can enter EFT details for the vendor, and Natalie, who can only approve EFT details for the vendor. Logged on as Anne, who has the ability only to enter, if I change one of these details, you can see when I save, the status went from active to entered.
and Anne can't change that status. But logged on as Natalie, she cannot change any of the other EFT details, but she can change the status from entered to active or inactive, depending. So we have seen how we can use EFT security to allow for the separation of duties between those who can enter the EFT details and those who can approve the EFT details. But now we're going to look at using Extender to create a notification so that when the EFT details are changed, the approvers can be alerted via email. So using Extender events, you can send emails when something changes, you can create an information manager note, and you can log the change, who did what, when, and where. But we're going to use an event that has been configured to send an email when something changes, and we're going to attach this event to the EFT vendor. And now, signed in as Anne, if I do a change to the EFT vendor's EFT details and save that, two things happen. The status will go to entered, as we saw previously, and Natalie will be sent an email alerting her of this change to the account name. You can also use Extender workflows to approve and reject record changes and events in Sage 300. For example, you could use Workflow to approve the vendor, customer, or employee's changes to the EFT details, and you could use Workflow to approve the creation of an EFT file. The advantage of using Workflow is you have a console with all the activities that you need to do for you to go and approve or reject all the vendors, customers, employees, change details, or creation of EFT files, rather than relying on emails alone. And also, you have a full audit trail of when the Workflow instance was created and when it was approved. So you've got a record of who was doing what when in terms of process. And this is the process I'm going to show you now. So logged in as Anne, I'm going to go ahead and create a new EFT vendor record, but it would work in the same way if I was amending an existing EFT vendor's record. So on saving the record, a Workflow instance is created and Natalie is alerted via email. And Natalie would receive an email, and on her Workflow console, she would see the EFT vendor new record approval waiting for her. From here, she could drill down and have a look at that EFT vendor record. And once she has checked that, she could go ahead and approve. Or if there are changes needed, she would reject and in the comment ask for the changes to be done and then come ahead and approve when it is resubmitted. But once the record is approved on the Workflow console, and in this case we need an approver's comment, so once the approver's comment has been typed in and the record is approved, then the record will drop off the Workflow console. And we'll have the history in the Extender audit trail, and we'll have the EFT vendor record being approved. And in the Workflow summary, we see that record that was started by Anne but approved by Natalie. And we have the comments that she recorded. So we've just seen the simple approval and setting of active of the EFT vendor's status using Workflow. And to further enhance the security, you can use the Extender Marketplace app for PGP encryption. So this allows the EFT file to be encrypted. So if the bank supports PGP encryption, you can configure EFT processing to SFTP the file and Extender to PGP encrypt that file before it's sent to the bank.
And now we are available for Q&A.